Okay, here we are, Act 4, Scene 3. We are back at the rebels' camp, so we're with Hotspur, Douglas, and Worcester. So at the rebels' camp in Shrewsbury, Hotspur and Douglas argue with Worcester about whether they ought to attack Henry's forces right away or hold off for a while. Worcester and Vernon urge them to wait. Not all the forces that Vernon will send have arrived yet, and since Worcester's band of knights on horses has just arrived that day, the horses are still worn out. But Hotspur and Douglas are both impatient to attack. Sir Walter Blunt arrives in their camp bearing an offer of peace from Henry. So remember, Sir Walter Blunt is one of the noblemen that remained loyal to King Henry. If Hotspur and his allies will state their grievances against Henry and disband their attack, he says Henry promises that he will satisfy their desires and grant full amnesty to the rebels. Hotspur then launches into a long speech in which he describes his family's dissatisfaction with Henry. When Henry himself had been the underdog several years before, trying to seize power from the king at the time, who was Richard II, the Percy family gave him invaluable help. Henry, then known as Henry Bolingbroke, had once been a mere cousin of the former king, exiled by his royal cousin for flimsy reasons, and Henry returned to England while King Richard was away fighting in Ireland. So here Hotspur is just going into the history of King Richard and how Henry came to power again. He originally claimed that he had only come to reclaim the title and inheritance that were due to him from his father, Richard's recently deceased uncle, whose lands Richard had seized upon his death. Henry stayed, of course, to fight for the crown of England. Partly swayed by the influence and power of the Percy family, the common people of England and the nobles of Richard's courts joined Henry's faction, allowing him to take over power from Richard in a bloodless coup, though Richard was later assassinated in mysterious circumstances. So, Hotspur's just going to go on a big rant again, essentially reiterate the entire play of Richard II. If it interests you and you actually want to know the whole series of like Richard II, Henry I, Henry I Part 1, Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, and then Henry V, you can watch the entire series of The Hallowed Crown. So it's 4 episodes. We're watching the 2nd episode because we're watching Henry IV Part 1. But in Richard II, he's played by Benedict Cumberbatch, and it's just really well done. So if you actually want to watch the whole series, it's on Google Play, and I think you can rent it for like $5. Okay, continuing on. Now King Henry seems to have forgotten all about the gratitude he owes to the Percy family, the most recent example being his refusal to pay a ransom for Mortimer after Mortimer was captured in Wales. This is all old information. We know all this. We know this is why the Percys are mad at King Henry in the first place. Hotspur's he's going on a rant. He's repeating himself. He's repeating information that we already know. Blunt asks if he should take Hotspur's words as a declaration of war, and Hotspur replies that Blunt should return to Henry and await Worcester in the morning with the rebels' decisions. Hotspur suggests they may decide to accept Henry's offer of amnesty after all. This is interesting for Hotspur because he's usually so rash and usually doesn't take his time to think. So the fact that he's actually willing to consider the king's peace offering shows a little bit of growth in his character, and it also shows just how weak the rebels actually are, that he has to consider the peace offering. Because again, remember, his dad didn't show up, and neither did Glendower. I'm not actually going to be reading Act 4, Scene 4, so Scene 4 has to do with the subplot of the Archbishop of York, which at the beginning of the play I mentioned that we're not going into at all, simply because of time and this platform of online learning, and it doesn't further the plot at all. So we're just skipping this scene. It's only a couple pages. If you're interested in the history of this, feel free to read the summary for yourself. But in terms of plot, it doesn't further the plot in any way. It's just extra historical information that Shakespeare puts into the story. Let's read our Scene 3. Oops.
Will fight with him tonight.
It may not be.
You give him then advantage.
Not a wait. Why say you so? Looks ye not for supply?
So do we.
His is certain, ours is doubtful.
Good cousin, be advised. Stir not tonight.
Do not, my lord. You do not counsel well. You speak it out of fear and cold heart.
So we see now that the rebels themselves are even divided. We have Douglas and Hotspur who want to start the war that very night. And then we have Worcester and Vernon who are saying, no way, half our army's not here. The other half isn't even coming. Also, we just got here. Our men are exhausted. There's no way we can fight and win right now.
Do me no slander, Douglas. By my life, and I dare well maintain it with my life, if well-respected honour bid me on, I hold as little counsel with weak fear as you, my lord, or any Scot that this day lives. Let it be seen tomorrow in the battle which yours fears. Yea, or tonight.
Tonight, say I.
Come, it may not be. I wonder much, being men of such great leading as you are, that you foresee not what impediments drag back our expedition. Certain horse of my cousin Vernon's are not yet come up. Your Uncle Worcester's horse came but today, and now their pride and mettle is asleep, their courage, with hard labour, tame and dull, that not a horse is half the half of himself. So are the...
To say that not a horse is half the half of himself, he's saying they're just they're exhausted. They're not even able, they don't even have a quarter of their usual strength.
Horses of the enemy in general journey baited and brought low. The better part of ours are full of rest.
The number of the king exceedeth ours. For God's sake, cousin, stay till all come in.
I come with gracious offers from the king. If you vouchsafe me hearing and respect.
Welcome, Sir Walter Blunt. Would to God you were of our determination. Some of us love you well, and even though some envy your great deservings and good name, because you are not of our quality, but stand against us like an enemy.
And God defend, but still I should stand so long as out of limit and true rule you stand against anointed majesty. But to my charge, the king hath sent to know the nature of your griefs, and whereupon you conjure from the breast of civil peace such bold hostility, teaching his duteous land audacious cruelty. If the king have anyway your good deserts forgot, which he confesseth to be manifold, he bids you name your griefs, and with all speed you shall have your desires with interest, and pardon absolute for yourself, and these herein misled by your suggestion.
So here the king is giving like a great offer. He's saying, tell me, where does he say it? The king has sent to know the nature of your griefs. So your griefs, the things that are bothering you. So the king's saying, tell me what's up. Why are you so mad? Why are you trying to create a rebellion? And I'll fix it. And on top of that, I promise to absolutely pardon you and anyone who's fighting with you. So he's kind of giving them a clean slate here.
The king is kind, and well we know the king knows at what time to promise, when to pay. My father and my uncle and myself did give him that same royalty he wears, and when he was not 26 strong, sick in the world's regard, wretched and low, a poor, unminded outlaw sneaking home, my father gave him welcome to the shore, and when he heard him swear and vow to God, he came but to be Duke of Lancaster, to sue his livery and beg his peace, with tears of innocency and terms of zeal. My father, in kind heart and pity moved, swore him assistance, and performed it too. Now when the lords and barons of the realm perceived Northumberland did lean to him, the more and less came in with cap and knee, met him in boroughs, cities, villages, attended him on bridges, stood in lanes, laid gifts before him, proffered him their oaths, gave him their heirs as pages, followed him even at the heels in golden multitudes. He presently, as greatness knows itself, steps me a little higher than his vow made to my father while his blood was poor upon the naked shore at Ravenspur, and now, forsooth, takes on him to reform some certain edicts and some strait decrees that lie too heavy on the Commonwealth, cries out upon abuses, seems to weep over his country's wrongs, and by this face, this seeming brow of justice, did he win the hearts of all that he did angle for. Proceeded further, cut me off the heads of all the favourites that the absent king in deputation left behind him here when he was personal in the Irish War.
That I came not to hear this.
Then to the point. In short time after, he deposed the king. Soon after that, deprived him of his life, and in the neck of that tasked the whole state. To make that worse, suffered his kinsman March, who is, if every owner were well placed, indeed his king, to be engaged in Wales, there without ransom to lie forfeited. Disgraced me in my happy victories, sought to entrap me by intelligence, rated mine uncle from the council board, in rage dismissed my father from the court, broke oath on oath, committed wrong on wrong, and in conclusion drove us to seek out this head of safety, and withal to pry into his title, the which we find too indirect for long continuance.
Shall I return this answer to the king?
Not so, Sir Walter. We'll withdraw a while. Go to the king, and let there be pawned some surety for a safe return again, and in the morning early shall mine uncle bring him our purposes. And so, farewell.
I would you would accept of grace and love.
And maybe so we shall.
Pray God you do.
So, addressing just the questions that are of utmost importance, numbers 2 and 3 kind of work together. So, Hotspur makes a statement about accepting Henry's offer of peace. How is this at odds with his statements in the previous scenes? And then number 2 asks, what does Hotspur's wavering about the upcoming battle tell the reader? Well, the fact that Hotspur is even considering peace and doesn't make a rash decision, for one, shows personal growth. This is very out of character for Hotspur. And it also suggests that he is now extremely uncertain about the upcoming battle for a variety of reasons. One, because he's got a terrible army at this point. Okay, half of them haven't shown up. Half of them are tired. And because of this, while he was once adamant upon rebelling, he's now considering the very opposite. He's considering an offer of peace. It also suggests that while he sees the king's offering of peace as extremely reasonable, which it is, the king does not have to offer peace to a group of rebels. Okay, so the fact that he is extending this olive branch, Hotspur is able to recognize this as quite the gesture. Okay, how it's at odds with the statements in the previous scenes. Not even in the previous scenes. In this very scene, Hotspur was ready to attack then, that very night. So for him to go from being ready to attack to being ready to accept peace, we see quite the change. And then number 5, what can you determine about Hotspur's relationship with his father and his uncle? Well, with his father, clearly it's more complicated than we might have originally thought. So what we might have thought was a, let's say, healthy, in parentheses, sorry, in quotations, so Hotspur clearly finds out that he can't count on his father. And also we see in this scene that him and Worcester, his uncle, are also arguing a lot. They're arguing over battle tactics and strategy, when to attack, when to not attack. We'll say they are at odds. Okay, so at the beginning of the play, it was easy to see the Percys as kind of this strong allied force, this unbreakable family bond, but now we're seeing them in a very different light, whereas the family bond that appeared to be broken at the beginning of the play between Hal and his father Henry, they've now completely mended their relationship, and they are now the strong and steady, unbreakable force. Okay, so we've had quite the shift in this play in terms of family dynamics, relationships, who can be trusted, who cannot be trusted. Okay, and that is it for this film, for this video. One more scene this week, then next week we're finishing up the play, and then you have your final written assignment, which is not another essay. Yay! It's actually going to be a creative assignment, which is great because some of you did choose to write a creative response in our first personal essay way at the beginning of the semester, but some of you yet have not written anything creative. So for this last assignment, everyone is going to write a creative piece, which will be, I think it'll be a lot of fun. So a little bit more enjoyable than an essay. Okay, that's it for this video. I will see you in the next one.